Bitcoin right now. I don't think 60 was the major number. I think 53, as long as we stay above that, I think we could see a comeback in Bitcoin to all-time highs. I think that 53 is the number to hold. If we break 53, we're probably going to see $46,000 under 53. But overall, it's still in a bull market. Just by looking at this chart, I think that $300 is going to be achieved this year. And most likely next year, my target is about 475.
Anmol Singh returns to the show. He's a trader, investor, and the author of Prepping for Success. We'll be talking about his views on Bitcoin, stocks, and the overall markets today, focusing on the tech sector. If you'd like to see Anmol's last interview with me, click on the link down below in the description or up here to revisit some of his calls. We'll be revisiting some of those calls today and getting his updated outlook. And if you haven't already, please sign up to my upcoming newsletter. It'll be released this month. It's completely free. It'll come out once a week. And what it is, it's a recap of my previous week's top videos, highlight reels, and also what's coming up next week in terms of news to watch, plus my own thoughts and analysis. Check it out. Be one of the first to get one of the first issues. Link down below to subscribe. Anmol, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. Always good chatting with you.
Always good to have you back. Now, like I mentioned, we can revisit some of your calls from last time when we get into the tech stocks that you follow. Let's talk broad markets first. The S&P 500, as we're talking today, 5,600 on the S&P as of July 12th. Now, this is like I told you last time. Every single week, it's a new high. And it's been like that for basically the second half of this year. Ever since May, it's been on an upswing. So what's next?
Yeah, I think the markets right now are in a floating period. I think everybody's expecting a rate cut, before the elections, maybe multiple of them. And because of that, the markets continue to trend higher. But I think it's not like new buying that's coming in that's pushing the markets higher. It's more like nobody really wants to sell because everybody's seeing the market go higher. Where else are you going to put your money? So I think we're in the floating territory, but this is the area where typically I always tell people we got to be the most cautious in this time frame, right? We're approaching that September, October time frame where typically markets see a downturn. And there's also 11 months typically after we first raise interest rates, we tend to see a little downturn in the markets, and we are running up extremely high into those levels. So for me, this is a period of being really, really cautious, being, concentrated more in your high conviction plays and not really having those, the big bets out there. Because I think the majority of the run that we've seen the good period for the time frame, right? Now, long term, I'm not talking long term, but I'm talking in the next, let's say, 6 to 9 months. I think the best is still, the best is like, behind us at the moment.
Right now, the S&P 500 is really concentrated. And what I mean by that is there's a big concentration of tech stocks, just a few tech names dominating the entire index, just a few tech names moving up the entire index. If you look at the NASDAQ, for example, it's the only sector, or the tech sector rather, it's the only sector beating the S&P 500 this year. All the other 9 sectors have either been flat or on par with the rest of the index or down. So as a trader, when you're looking at this, what do you do?
I think as a trader, for me, I am focusing more on the small cap sector at the moment, like IWM, because when interest rates, if that's what people are expecting, and since tech has already seen the run up, S&P has already seen the run up, energy stocks have seen a run up, the small caps for the longest time have been lagging, right? They're lagging the markets. IWM has been lagging. So what we're noticing is if interest rates go down, the beneficiary is actually going to be the small cap sector. And we're starting to see some comebacks in a lot of those smaller cap stocks as well as IWM. So I think that is where, the most, I guess, potential for reward lies at the moment. Because Microsoft, Tesla, Apple, Google, Meta, NVIDIA, these stocks have seen a tremendous run up that I find it hard to believe technically that there's going to be additional buying coming in at these levels. So I think they are due for a pullback. And if they are the ones that caused the run up in the NASDAQ, right, they're also the ones that are going to cause the pullback in the markets as well. So for me, I'm kind of shifting my position into the high concentrated conviction plays and then also looking at making smaller bets as a trader in the small cap sector. But I think this is a trader's market. I think investment is going to be a great time for investing again, after the elections. But until now, until the election, I'm in a complete trader's mode where I'm locking in profits along the way and I'm not looking for the big follow-throughs.
Before we continue with the interview, I want to tell you about another way you can invest your Bitcoins and store them safely instead of using a traditional wallet or an exchange. Consider an IRA. Today's sponsor, iTrust Capital, is one such IRA that offers 35 crypto assets and the lowest trading fees in the crypto IRA space at 1% only. And being an IRA, it also offers unique tax benefits. If you'd like to get started and learn more, click on itrust.capital/David in the link down below or scan the QR code up here. If you're over 18 and you want to open a new account with cash or roll over an existing account, you can do so using my referral link. And if you use that referral link, you'll get $100 in signing bonuses. So you think the small caps are going to catch up to the large caps in this perhaps next rate cutting cycle? That's what's going to happen?
Yeah, and I think at the next cycle, I think small caps will outperform the tech stocks and the bigger cap stocks.
Let's take a look at some individual stocks or securities. Let's start with Bitcoin, actually. So if you don't mind pulling up a chart of Bitcoin for us, Anmol, I think the question that I've been getting a lot on my show is whether or not $60,000 is a floor below which you can start seeing a renewed bear market. Now, as we're speaking today, we're at 58,000. That's a breakdown below what people have told me is a psychologically important floor. What do you think?
Yeah, for me, 53 was the number. So there's a moving average that I use a lot. Not a conventionally used moving average is the 233. And typically that is where, because everybody's looking at the 200 period moving average. So my research has shown that they always pierce the 200. And then somehow this 233 moving average it ends up holding, which it did again on Bitcoin, which is around the 54, 53,000 area. So I think as long as we stay above 53, Bitcoin's not in trouble yet. We could easily see a run up back into the 80,000 area. And as you can see, this was a downtrending sloping trend line. Every single dip seems to hold in that area. And we're still above that at the moment. So I'm not going to be overly bearish on Bitcoin right now. I don't think 60 was the major number. I think 53, as long as we stay above that, I think we could see a comeback in Bitcoin to all-time highs. But the bigger pullback, if it does happen, it's not out of the question. If you take a look at the monthly time frame, right? Every time we do run up into that area, we see a pullback. So I think that 53 is the number to hold. If we break 53, we're probably going to see $46,000 under 53. But overall, it's still in a bull market. I think this is just going to be a higher low, and then the markets are going to trend back up. So people need to realize, even though you might believe in something fundamentally, or you might have your fundamental reasons to be bullish on things, technicals always seem to work. When things get this extended, as you see from Bitcoin back in 2021, straight run up, we got a pullback. Then we got extended again, we got a pullback. Now we're in the same area again, just like these two highs. So it's not out of the question to expect a pullback to 46, and that still be a bullish move. And I think it's healthy for the markets to see profit taking unless you just keep running up. A lot of this downturn was also caused by Germany, right? Germany was selling out their balance sheet of Bitcoin, and that caused a lot of that drop in because increased supply. But overall, I don't think it's in trouble yet. I think it's on its own. When I hate when people compare Bitcoin to tech stocks, then they compare it to gold, and they compare all these different things. They have to realize this is assets on its own. It's a different asset class, so it's not really correlated with anything else. And but if it definitely going to be a beneficiary if interest rates come down.
I'd just like to point out to people watching, most of the Bitcoins collected by Western nations, Germany, the US, for example, they didn't actually go out and buy those Bitcoins. Those were confiscated Bitcoins from criminals that they've collected over the years. So it's not like a market signal, oh, they were buying before, now they're selling. No, they're just offloading for whatever reason. But you're right. It did scare a lot of people. Now, my question is, if you look at this chart that you have on the screen, Anmol, people are looking at this and they're thinking, well, could this repeat in the sense that in 2022, we had a big correction by 50%. I don't know if there are any technical indicators that can show you whether or not such a big move can be repeated, Anmol. What do you think?
I think it absolutely can be repeated. Again, it depends on what your fundamental view is on Bitcoin. Like technically, as I said, take it level by level. So as long as we stay above 53, nothing to be concerned about. We could go back up, but under 53, we're most likely going to see 46,000. But as a part of repeating this move, I think it's highly unlikely because now we have different ETFs, we have institutions involved. There's a lot of people supporting the price of Bitcoin. So I don't think we're going to repeat this type of a cycle, but can we see a pullback into this 46? Absolutely. So I think that is something that you need to be prepared for. And I hope Michael Saylor is prepared for that when that happens. And I think that's some of the things to look at is take it level by level. As you know, long term, I'm not a believer in Bitcoin just because I don't see the use cases for it. But again, that's my view, and it could be different from everybody else's view. But I think the risk reward lies more in the alternate coins than it does Bitcoin. Because even if Bitcoin goes from 58,000 to 80,000, you're going to see you got a 30%, 50% return. But the altcoins, they have been lagging the markets at the moment. And I think they're going to be the biggest beneficiaries for interest rates when they come down.
So is there a particular level that you would feel comfortable buying? I know you're maybe not a long-term believer of Bitcoin, but just from a technical perspective, would you buy at a certain level once it gets to that level?
Yeah, I think 46,000 is a tradable level.
Okay.
If you do get an opportunity to get at 46,000, I think that's a good trade back to like the 60s. But even this was not a bad opportunity, like at 53,000, right? That was, I think that's a viable opportunity as a trader where you can say, okay, let me buy Bitcoin at, 57, 58,000 and give it a risk until like 53. So I have, let's say we're risking, $4,000 per coin at the moment with a potential reward of it going back to 72. So I think this is a pretty tradable level, but I'd definitely start to get concerned under 53,000.
Can we take a look at some of the tech stocks now? Starting with NVIDIA, one of the biggest names, well, the biggest name right now in tech, the hottest stock this year. Looks like a double top forming in June. What's your read on the situation?
Yeah, technically we are way extended. I start always with the monthly time frame, and markets and cycles always repeat themselves. So let's go back over here in the year 2021. We saw a big run up in Nvidia, where Nvidia went up from split adjusted from 6 to 34, and then we got a pretty big pullback, right, from 32 down to like $12. And now we're in the same and way more extended levels here. So I think Nvidia is probably due for a pullback, maybe $100 a share. I think that's where probably it's going to come down. So another 30% drop is not out of the question on NVIDIA at the moment. Definitely would not be a buyer here. If you are a long-term investor, you love NVIDIA, probably makes sense to hold on and do covered calls on it so you can keep generating income on that. But I think for me to be a buyer of NVIDIA again, it has to be around the $100 area.
Well, the thing is, Emil, and this is not just with you, it's a lot of people have been telling me this in the last year and a half. If you take a look at where NVIDIA was at the start of 2023, right? It was literally at, I think what, a tenth of the value right now.
Yeah.
So, and then people were like, okay, in the start of 2024, they're like, well, I wouldn't be a buyer now because it's already gone up 4 times. And in the middle of 2024, they were like, well, I wouldn't be a buyer now because it's already at $100. So anytime it's moved up in the last year and a half, people told me, well, it's difficult to be a buyer now. And now I'm hearing the same thing from you. To what point do you say, well, it's going to run up more? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I think for me, I'm one of the traders that I'd rather be out of a trade and wishing I was in it than being in it and wishing I was out. So for me, capital preservation is number one thing. So if I see a potential of something dropping 30, 40% and impacting my portfolio, and I say to myself, can that money be used wisely in maybe a bunch of other things that haven't seen that run up like Tesla? I think that's where I saw the opportunity. So even though I personally was wrong on NVIDIA, I think I sold off my position somewhere over here and I missed out on this big run up. But then I made that compensated for that by getting into other positions that were lagging, but buying Tesla in the hundreds, buying it again in the 150s. And now we're seeing a breakout on this stock. So as a trader, you always got to look at where is the best use for your capital, right? Where's a trade that you'd rather be, in. So I think NVIDIA is one of those, sure, I wish I was in it still, but at the moment, I'm still better utilizing my capital and protecting my downside because you don't want to be the one getting caught off guard when things decide to pull back, like for a lot of people in 2021 when NVIDIA did that, right? I mean, when it dropped from 34 down to like 10, but now at 10, was that a buyable spot? That was a buyable spot, right? And then it ran up again over here, like $50, but then we got to pull back to 40. That was a viable spot. So you want to be buying pullbacks rather than buying it on the extension. So as technical traders, we always look to buy as close as we can to the moving averages, like the 9 and the 21, as opposed to buying here. So I'm pretty confident NVIDIA is going to see a pullback, but then it might resume its uptrend. So I think $100 would be a viable level, and then it might continue its uptrend, but nothing goes up in a straight line. So as traders, you got to always look for pullbacks.
You wouldn't short right now at these
I wouldn't be.
levels.
No, I have been shorting, but I've been trading it, meaning I did short NVIDIA over here. We bought some put options on this, but then you see when it pulled back to the moving average, what did I do? I got out of it, right? And now it's back up again. I thought about it, but I haven't shorted it again yet. But I always look to short these extensions and then get out of them on a pullback into the 21 MA, which is what we did. So we've been trading in and out of a lot of different stocks and not looking for the big short. I think shorting is where people tend to get into trouble. And my portfolio is more about trading in and out of things.
One final question on NVIDIA. Do you look at other chip makers and perhaps think that perhaps NVIDIA is overstretched compared to, let's say, AMD or Taiwan Semi? Anything that's in the pure space of semiconductors and chips, anything that's lagging behind NVIDIA, would they be good potential players for investors and traders right now?
Yeah, I've been looking at Intel. I think Intel's the one that's been lagging the most. Like AMD, ASML, SMCI, they've all seen the run-ups, but NVIDIA or Intel has just started to see that run up. So you see how it was lagging, trading below all the moving averages, started to find support in the 30s, but then finally, when it got above the moving averages, you saw a beautiful trade from 30 down to up to 35. So I think this is where I would be focusing on stuff that has lagged behind and that might eventually catch up to that. So I think Intel is definitely one that I've been looking at. You see a tremendous pullback from $50 to 30. So I think this thing has potential to go back into the 40s.
Let's take a look at Tesla now. You had just pulled it up, so let's switch back to the chart. So second quarter, I'll just read you a report from Reuters. Tesla's quarterly deliveries fall less than expected. Shares rally. This was dated early July, July 2nd. On Tuesday, reported a smaller than expected 5% drop in vehicle deliveries in the second quarter as the electric car makers' price cuts and incentives helped mitigate cooling demand. And the stock, as you know, rallied 40% in the last month. Now, this is a huge move. Overall, then, before we talk about that particular move, what's your overall assessment of Tesla and your outlook?
Yeah, I think my outlook on Tesla has been the most bullish I've ever been on this stock. I've been not been a bull for the last few years, but until like last couple of years, I've been a pretty big Tesla bull. Just because technically it made a lot of sense. You see a stock that's lagging behind all the other, major six stocks, major seven stocks, and then it's a technical play. Look at this beautiful trend line. Every time it touches that trend line, it seems to reject. And that's where we were taking profits. But now you see how it's finally broken through. That's a long-term trend. That's a long-term weekly trend that was just broken out. So I think Tesla is going to be probably my price target for this year was 295, which I posted, I think several months ago. And even when we were last chatting on our show, Tesla was trading around the 160s, 170s, where I talked about this being a buyable spot because it bounced off this lower trend line. That was a buyable trend line. Look at that. Held it perfectly. And now the stock since then, from 160s, 170s, since we last chatted to 270, has seen a tremendous run up. And I think this trend is going to continue. The long-term trend is broken. And in fact, Tesla is doing what NVIDIA did a few years ago. Let me show you the NVIDIA chart so you'll get an idea. Look at this NVIDIA trend here. NVIDIA did the same thing, major pullback, but when it finally broke that weekly downtrend line, this new uptrend resumed. And I think Tesla is exactly at that same exact spot, but this was a major pullback. Now it's broken that weekly trend line. And I think Tesla is going to have its NVIDIA moment in the next couple of years.
As a technical trader, how do you decide that this is a breakout to the upside on the trend line versus just an overbought position?
No, I think it definitely was overbought on the daily, and we saw a pullback. As I said, nothing goes up in a straight line forever, but then we pulled back, and that seemed to have holding at the moment. Now we have earnings coming up in just next week, I think, on Tesla. But for me, this is where we know that this is clearly broken out, and I think all these pullbacks, even down to 220, are viable in my opinion, because this is where stocks typically would make a higher low, something like this, where we pull back and then we continued our uptrend. So I think that's where Tesla is at, and this was a great accumulation base to be buying Tesla around these levels. So long term, I think delivery numbers and stuff like that is not really my biggest focus because that is still in the old paradigm where people are still thinking about it as an auto manufacturer, comparing it to GM and Ford and things of that nature. But I think robotaxi platform is going to be a game changer because they're basically recreating Airbnb but for cars. Imagine a fleet of cars. You own a Tesla, I own a Tesla, and now you're going on a vacation. But if it's a self-driving app, you could just make your car available on the rideshare app. And if somebody calls it, it'll just drive your car over to themselves and you're going to get paid. So that's like basically creating an Airbnb business out of a Tesla robotaxis. So I think that is going to be the game changer. And there were recently talks that, this is just rumor, but like how the Uber CEO sold 50% of his shares and Elon and them started following each other. So there were talks that Travis might be leading that robotaxi division. Again, it's not a confirmed news at the moment. But I think that's yet to be seen. I think now they're saying the event's been pushed back from 8th of August. It's not a confirmed news at the moment, but Bloomberg reported yesterday that 8th of August, the robotaxi event's been pushed back to October. But 2 months is not going to cause any big deal. I think they're going to unveil a lot of new prototypes that are going to be a lot of catalysts for Tesla ahead. The energy division grew by tremendous margin this last quarter as well.
Here's my pushback on that, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here. A lot of people have agreed with you that the long-term vision for Tesla is a data company, it's an AI company, robotics company, it's anything but a car company, right? But most of their revenues right now still come from their cars, and the fact of the matter is, their car division, just from an optics perspective, doesn't look great. They're cutting prices. Nobody likes to cut prices, right? There's facing a lot of competition from everybody that's going EV right now. What they had before the last 10 years for being a high performance EV car, that edge is no longer unique to just Tesla. Porsche, Audi, Mercedes, BMW, they all have good EV cars right now. A lot of other car companies are doing the same thing. I just don't see the value proposition of their main cash flow generator right now until they start to create these other things that you've talked about. I don't know. What's your pushback to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think my perspective is, I mean, going back to the robotaxi. So let's say, that ends up coming to fruition, where it's kind of like an Airbnb model. People can rent out their Teslas on the ride sharing app, and you can make money on that. Now, what's that going to do to car sales? Like, what's that going to do to other people's car sales when they're going to be likely to buy Tesla, not just generate income from that, but making that an EV? So I think that's, if you're looking at just car numbers, I think that's going to accelerate the number of sales of the cars. But even then, like, look at other EV manufacturers. They're nowhere close to Tesla. I think Rivian delivered what, 10,000, 15,000 something cars like that, compared to Tesla delivering almost 500,000 cars.
Yeah.
The second place in the EV sector is still way behind. And I don't think it makes sense as an investor to pick a second place when you have a clear winner, in my opinion, in this EV sector. Now, going back to it technically here, you notice how in the declining period, we're seeing, as the stock was falling, we were seeing lower volume. And now on the breakout, we've seen that increased volume. So that typically confirms a breakout technically. So just by looking at this chart, I think that $300 is going to be achieved this year. And most likely next year, my target is about 475.
475. That's a huge move. And that's based on what, technicals?
Purely technical play, but obviously there's fundamental catalysts along the way. The energy division's growing, the robotaxis, the Optimus robots, where on the last earnings call, Elon talked about how that division on its own is probably going to trump anything else that Tesla does. Now, that's yet to be seen. I'm not even factoring that in my valuation, but purely as a technical play, I think Tesla is where NVIDIA was a few years ago when I saw that massive breakout.
Generally speaking, what is your overview or outlook on the auto sector? Everyone seems to be heading in the EV division. There's been some pushback by some automakers about the 2030 deadline to go EVs, but it seems to me that the industry is heading in that direction. Will there be consumer demand? I ask you that because we both like cars. I follow the car community. There's just a lot of hate with EVs from the car community, guys. I know they represent a relatively small proportion of the overall, car consumer market, but it's just a sentiment I'm hearing. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, my personal opinion is people should have the choice to buy whatever they want. I don't think it should be all EVs. People should have the availability to buy gas cars or whatever they want to buy. But here's the thing. There are two main things, right? Number one, let's say if oil continues to get expensive, right? Gas continues to get expensive. Then there's going to be a point where consumers have to make the choice of, hey, I want my gas car, but do I want to pay like $6, $8, $10 a gallon, to fill up my tank, or do I get an EV? And at what point economically that makes enough sense to people to say it doesn't make sense for me to buy a gas car? So that's number one. Number two, if FSD is fully achieved, which we're not there yet, but we're getting close. If that's fully achieved, I think that incentive at some point people are going to have to decide that, do I want the convenience of the full self-driving? Do I want all of that convenience as well as the savings that you get from an EV, versus at what point the technology gets so outdated in the gas cars that makes you want to upgrade? So I think eventually that's going to happen. But again, I'm not opposed to people having their choice. They could buy whatever they want. But at some point, and I think oil is only going to go up from here, and gas is only going to go up from here. At some point, it doesn't make any economical sense to own a gas-powered car.
Can you give us another tech name or any other stock that you're following right now?
I think for me, in addition to Tesla, some of the short-term trades that I have, but again, I might or might not be in them, a month from now, because I've already started to see a move. I've been following RKLB, which is Rocket Lab, right? Again, purely a technical play. The stock's been, beaten down name, but it's been finding support into this level where clearly it's been an accumulation base. So recently I got into this stock around like $4.90. Since then it's up to about $5.50. I think Rocket Labs is probably going to be a technical play back to like $7 or $8. So this is one that I personally have a position in at the moment. But again, I might be in it if it keeps running up like this. So that's one name I'm looking at.
What do they do? Rocket Lab? What do they make?
And the same specter, right? They have government contracts, just like SpaceX. They're doing rocket launches and stuff like that. So I think that is the space that they're in. And then I'm also looking at some of the in the biotech type of sector, biotech like CDNA. They were looking at as a technical play as well. I think maybe I don't know if Kathy would owns this or not, but these genetic stocks like Beam, like CRISPR, right? I think these are where the opportunities are going to lie going forward because they've seen a massive drop, but now they seem to be finding support. So I think these biotech slash genetic stocks are going to see a comeback.
Let's end on cryptos then. You mentioned that you think the altcoin space has more potential than Bitcoin. So give us some altcoin names. Let's start with Ethereum. Ethereum has not done well this year. And
Yeah.
I just wonder what your take is. The ETH ETF has been widely anticipated for quite some time. It just doesn't, it hasn't really pushed it up to new all-time highs in the last couple of months, right? What happened?
Yeah, competition. Ethereum is really expensive. Like, I mean, just the gas fees alone is such a barrier from the big institutions or the financial systems of the world to ever use Ethereum. Ethereum was the beneficiary of the whole NFT space when it started. That's why everybody was listing the NFTs. But now people are starting to see that, okay, it's way too expensive. We can't really use this. The gas fees are so high. So people are focusing on the other type of coins like Solana, like Algorand, like Cardano. But even with Solana, the issue is that they are over-reporting their transaction volume. So if you look at this, say we had X amount of transactions, but if you really dive in technically, you'll see that majority of them they're counting inner transactions and failed transactions. So the actual volume is actually 8% of what they're doing. So Solana is another one that I think is, VC pump, that they caused that run up, but this is also not going to be a beneficiary. I'm a pure like believer in Algorand. So far I've been wrong on it. Clearly, this crypto hasn't seen a big run up at all. But long term, that's where I'm seeing the developers come in. They introduced the Python language, which is the most widely used programming language. So they're going after developers the same way Google went after developers when they were starting with Android. So I think that's where we're at the moment. MasterCard just announced a partnership with Algorand. And then there's TravelX companies where you can do airline tickets, NFTs on Algorand, and a lot of good things coming. There were recently IBM and a bunch of different companies were coding Algorand in their patents. So they're doing some research into how this could be used. And even ECB, European banks and Italian banks, they're looking at Algorand and coding Algorand as a potential use case for them to power the financial system. So I think that's where I have my bets in. Clearly, I've been wrong at the moment, but I think that this is a long-term investment for me that I've been holding for, I've been holding for a while, and I've been continuing to hold because as long as I see good things happening in the space. They recently held their Decipher conference where they talked about a lot of good things in the works with the Algorand blockchain of it being used in the financial system of the world because of the low transaction fee, but also instant finality. I think 2 point something seconds transactions final versus Ethereum taking like 10 minutes, 15 minutes and causing extremely high gas fees.
Well, I appreciate you admitting that you were wrong so far, but that brings me to a bigger question about trading. At what point do you, as a trader, realize it's time to take losses if you've been wrong on a position, if your thesis hasn't played out so far, versus holding because you really believe in your thesis?
Yeah, so great question. So I think there are two different things. So one bucket I categorize as trades. So when I'm taking trades, I have a very well-defined exit points, my entry point, just like I said with Bitcoin. If you buy it here, 53 under 53 is my exit point. That's a trade. But when I make an investment, I'm purely looking at it. The reason I got in is that still valid. So the question I ask myself are they still growing their transactions? Yes, Algorand had the record high transaction this quarter. I think 240 million plus transactions happened on that. Is the space still moving forward? Are they creating new partnerships? As long as that is happening, we can't look at the price of the altcoins. As I said, this is still like it's almost like investing in a penny stock in the early stages of internet. So it doesn't make sense to trade in and out of this one because you're not going to see any movement in altcoins until interest rates come down. So I think I'm going to wait till interest rates come down and see how altcoin performs there, and then reevaluate my thesis at that level. But right now, I don't see any fundamental reasons to be exiting this space at these record low prices.
Wait, just explain to us in layman terms, please. Why would altcoins move if interest rates come down?
Well, the cheaper the money gets, right? Those are the beneficiary even in the NFT space. I mean, last time when interest rates were that low, Algorand was trading $2, and so were other altcoins. And recently, we've seen no money come in into altcoins because nobody's sure regulatory approval, but also the cost of money is extremely high. And a lot of these institutions, a lot of these hedge funds, they do lever their money, and they use the low cost of borrowing money to buy altcoins when they see that there's going to be better use of the capital by investing in the safer stuff like Apple, Microsoft. They tend to pull out even from their crypto investments and then they tend to put it in the higher cap stocks. But when the cost of money gets lowered again, I think there's going to be another big run up in potentially altcoins.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Anmol. I appreciate your thoughts today. Tell us where we can find you, learn more about you.
Yeah, the best place would be go to my website. It's anmol.net. And that's where you can learn more about what I do and get in touch with me. And I'm most active on my social channels on Twitter and Instagram. My username on both of those is Delta90, DELTA99ETY.
Okay, very good. We'll put the links down in the description below. Thanks very much, Anmol. Appreciate your time. Speak next time.
Always good chatting with you.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.